You fool! Warren is dead.
Welcome to HorrorBabble. We return again with another story by British author Paul Draper, writer of the dark fiction collection Blackgate Tales. In the Puppeteer of Prague, a situation unfolds concerning a murderous mannequin. Be sure to check out Paul's unsettling anthology, link in the video description. We hope you enjoy this one. The Puppeteer of Prague by Paul Draper. It was the first day of March 1939, but Prague was as cold as the heart of winter. After leaving the half-empty office, I was too distraught to go home and face Marie, so I crossed the old town square to Pavel's bar and drank. After a time, Pavel pushed me towards the door, saying, "Easy, you have done what you can. What will be, will be. Please go home." I swayed out into the night air and ignored the whooping, black-shirted university goons gathering under the towering Gothic steeples of Týnské Mokram. I wanted nothing to do with them. My hazy stumbling led me to a little cobbled alley, with stones shiny in the moonlight. The alley was dark, except for an illuminated bar sign halfway down. Marie would be long in bed by now, so I wandered through the door and found myself in an unfamiliar place, talking to an unfamiliar face. The bartender introduced himself as Václav, and poured us both some steaming svaják. The lighting was low. Hushed figures sat at tables around us. "Thank you," I said. "Friend, you are welcome," he replied. "You would think we were at Christmas. I cannot see from my windows in the morning for frost." He was a small man in his 50s, but his eyes were alive with a youthful energy. He was bearded, wore a dark blue corduroy jacket, and sported a peaked cap atop a mass of hair. "Your face is full of sadness. Tell me why." I heaved a sigh. Pavel's beer was tripping my tongue, and the words took time to form. "We're about to fall to Hitler. It is a matter of time. Harker is to travel to Berlin within a week or two. It's over." "Ah," replied Václav. "Don't be so sure. What can we do? The Sudetenland was supposed to be the end. As it is, we have fed meat to wolves, and the pack is hungry for more. Harker will be a puppet, or gone by the end of spring." Václav tilted his glass and watched the steam rise into the half-light. "A puppet, maybe, but do not underestimate the power of such. Let me tell you a tale that may give you heart." And so he began. The puppeteer drew the crowds. He was an excellent performer. Each Friday night on his stage in an auditorium between the Charles Bridge and the castle, he would present his marionettes to applause and laughter. We Czechs love our puppets. He had a wide range of characters in his black travelling case, which was almost as tall as himself. He would arrive on stage, stern-faced, and flick the ornate silver clasps open, as the hubbub of the audience lowered with the lights. Out they would come, the tales they would tell. Poor Peter and Gretel, lost in the woods and menaced by a wild bear. Then Felicia de Mornay, a baroness from England, woeful in her tales of jewel-encrusted misery, and blinded by the wonders she lived alongside. Lastly, there was the main star, Lord Gustav. Gustav was top-hatted and monocled, with an air of authority. Made from pale linden, he would stroll with his cane across the stage in an uncanny gait, his long coat swirling about his fine boots. The secret of puppetry is not yanking the wooden controller. It is the touching of the strings, and this puppeteer was a master. As Gustav walked, the puppeteer slid his free hand along the strings, slowly and softly, and each twitch produced a lifelike movement from Gustav. The lord peered into the crowd. He told them about his life as a respectable noble, then conducted interviews with those in the audience, small wooden hands crossed behind his back. It was eerie. A person sitting 7 rows back could tell precisely if Lord Gustav's painted eyes were looking straight at him. After initial embarrassment, the audience member would start talking to Gustav as if he were human, and for that moment he was. These were mixed audiences. There were soldiers, market sellers, traders, and artisans. There were young lovers on dates and older folks out to forget their troubles and find some laughter. For this was not so long ago. These times were the same troubling times we find ourselves in now. Every so often, government officials would be in the audience. These were the people preparing Czechoslovakia for its dark fate from the north. Gustav found these people fascinating. He would step closer, the spotlight swinging his way as he strolled along the ground towards the interviewee. The interrogation was both funny and deep. "So," Gustav intoned one night, "you work for the Interior Ministry?" He cocked his head to one side, as the crowd looked on in amazement. Yes, I do," chortled the fat and mustachioed gentleman. 22 years this summer." "I see. And you conduct this work in the restaurant?" said Gustav. Cain pointed at the man's belly. The gentleman was good-humored and took this with a chuckle. "Yes, I suppose you could say that." "We find ourselves in trying times," said Gustav, tapping his cane on the ground. "We do, but what will be, will be." Gustav swept a hand across his brow in feigned shock, and the audience roared. Later that evening, a mist descended across Charles Bridge and hung in the air above the ground. The statues were half hidden on the ornate rails, and beside the walkway rows of stony legs pushed up through the fog, supporting unseen bodies. The fat and mustachioed man hurried across, the warmth of the night's beer not sufficient to ward away eager thoughts of a pan-heated bed. There came a tapping sound, wood on stone. The man stopped and peered around. Seeing nothing, he continued, but halted again at a rat-a-tat-tat. "Anyone there, bedevil?" he called. No answer came, but from the height of a fog-shrouded statue a tiny, long-coated figure lowered itself. "What the—" spluttered the man, rubbing his eyes. The figure tapped a stick on the side of the statue, and the man walked closer. It was Lord Gustav, head cocked to one side. The fat man's body now sways in the cold currents of the Vltava. It is raw and pale, and the fish take a little more away each day. Václav's words washed over me like a dream. I absorbed each one as he told his story, but the wine and the shadowy atmosphere of the bar had woven a paralyzing spell across me. His voice had a sonorous bass quality, and in my stupor it sounded like the intonation of a calming oracle. "You see," he said, "puppets can be influential in the right circumstances. Have some more wine." He poured, and the svazhak swirled in the glass, misting the sides and condensing in little clouds above it. And yet, there is more. These things did not end atop Charles Bridge that night. He continued his tale. Prague is an old city. It was a tribal intersection before the various Roman empires, both holy and unholy, made it such an important trading base. The cold, coursing artery of the Vltava has carried life to the city, but also sometimes destruction. It was the capital of Bohemia before it was our nation, and the allies of the Habsburgs marched across these same narrow streets. I wonder where their feet fell. Perhaps you do too. Prague is a monolith of power, but also something alive. It is my view that God himself lives in this city, somewhere across the crooked rooftops and garrets, perhaps as a cat, perhaps just on the cold air that blows across the Sudetenland road, along to the blackened sides of the Powder Tower, after dark. It is across this landscape that Lord Gustav prayed. Devils of the state conspired to deliver this nation from the inside to our enemies, and it was not to be tolerated. The worst of these complicit dogs were in the Interior Ministry. Our weak President Harker, instead of being to blame, may be the only one holding these forces away from us. The university fascists and the sympathizers, both in the West and here in Prague, had already drawn up plans for the new occupation. Gustav was not having it. With his handler and his interrogative skill, he identified all those at his show who he marked as traitors, workers at the ministry. One by one they were visited. A tap on the window before dawn, an encounter on a quiet hill, a deadly rendezvous in the park after nightfall. Gustav is clever and shrewd. He hides the traitors away. Winding sheets and shallow pits dot the lonely woods of Hukla, and soon grass will grow, and we will lose their traces. The sewers contain more than dishwater and animal fats, and abandoned basements in the old town have been used once again after dark for grim storage. He is equal in his methods with both male and female enemies. After one show in the cold of January, they found a sad-faced lady hanging in her own kitchen. Only stray dogs may have seen anything that night. A man hurrying away with an ornately clasped black case. The official judgment was suicide. Everyone agreed she never smiled. And so it shall go until we find freedom from threat. Karin, I slurred. Your pardon? The lady was Karin. Václav stroked his beard, and those lively grey eyes scanned mine. You know of her? My work. My mind fumbled the pieces of the night together, like a novice sculpting clay. My office had seemed so empty these past weeks, but my supervisor and I had thought that colleagues were just fleeing the approaching conflict. You work at the Interior Ministry? Asked Václav, his gaze fixed on me. Yes. Well, I see. I think that perhaps we need to have brandy. He stood up and, as he did so, his head entered the smoky shadows. He walked towards the far end of the bar with soft steps. I sat up and swayed on my stool. This bar was open late. The figures on the perimeter maintained their huddled conversations, and my eyes fell across the decanted liquor, the rows of thick beer glasses, and to the floor behind the bar, where there sat a large black case, clasped ornately with silver buckles. Václav returned. The brandy is empty on the shelf. Stay here, I'll fetch the good one from the back room. He clasped his hand down on mine, and his rough skin felt like sandpaper. I waited for him to disappear beyond view, and then hurried out, clattering into a table on the way. The freezing night air rushed into my lungs as I hurried along the cobblestones and out to who knew where. Marie had talked to me about my drinking and lack of presence of mind. I had no idea where I was. 2 hours later, I still don't. I have tried to maintain a straight line, but each lane is darker than the last. The night air has worked some wine out of my head. A rising terror is clearing the fuzziness. Branches knock in the trees like wooden shoes. Each clack of a shutter sounds like a linden cane on cobbles. Every gust of a leaf in the gutter reminds me of a string softly pulled. And there, ahead in this narrow alleyway, the smallest of figures. If you enjoyed listening today, be sure to subscribe to the channel by hitting the red subscribe button below. After doing so, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button to receive new content notifications. If you'd like to support our work and receive exclusive perks, consider becoming a channel member by clicking the Join button below. To support us in other ways, see the video description for links to our Bandcamp and Patreon pages, our merch store over at Teespring, and further information relating to our releases on Audible, iTunes, and Spotify. And until next time,